Okay, hello and welcome. Hello. Welcome to Social Media Hacks to Build Your Brand. My name is Meghan Crosby-Jolliffe. I work at Theater Bay Area, and I am joined by...
Hi everyone, my name is Adedokun, and I'm a musician and an actor in the Bay Area.
Morning, everybody. My name is Tasi Alabastro. I'm also an actor and content creator on different social media platforms. Thanks.
Okay, so to start us off, each of us are going to talk a little bit about our social media philosophies, things that we like about it, and just sort of set the scene for everything. So Art, if you wouldn't mind going to the first slide. Okay, this is me. So my main interaction with social media in a professional way is through the Theater Bay Area social media, by making content when we go to see shows, using that as a platform to kind of promote the art that's being made. So not always necessarily to promote the brand of TBA, but to promote the brand of Bay Area theater in general. We've been leaning a lot into making video content, because specifically on Instagram, because that's where we're getting engagement and we kind of see it pay off in the algorithm with video content. But we're doing a lot of learning and trial by error. And so I'm delighted to sit here and have this conversation with the two of you so we can learn together. All right, if you go to the next slide. So next is Tasi.
Yeah, that's me. Yeah, so social media philosophy is, if you're going to post and you're not sure why you're posting it, then don't post it, or put it in your drafts. I feel it's akin to when you're trying to write an angry letter at somebody, you're like, maybe I'll let this sit for a second. And I think coming at it from an individual, bringing in their experience to community, I think it's good to just, typos are okay. Is that weird to say? I feel like typos are okay. It actually drives engagement in some strange way. Like, oh my god, that's incorrect. And then you're like, oh, thanks for the message. There you go, write that down, tips. In fact, when you write it down, write it as typos. Yeah, and warm, goofy, insightful, those are words that I did not pick for myself. Those are words that I picked after I've asked a community that I trust to describe the perception of myself that you are experiencing. And so I thought that was good, and then I decided to lean into that because that's the part that is most engaging for the community that I'm serving.
Hi, again, my social media philosophy is pretty simple. Plan ahead. I try my best to not get lost in the sauce of social media, and I very much use it as a tool. I generally don't use it to post about my personal life. I use it because it's something that we need to promote ourselves as artists. So generally, I will collect all of the information within what I'm doing. For example, if I'm doing a music video, or if I'm a part of this beautiful musical, I will make a collection of posts, and I will time when I'm going to post them, and then I leave social media alone. It's more so just because it can be, social media is such a strong, powerful tool, but there's also the side of, people using it for not so great reasons. You can, end up doom scrolling. There's so many different things. So I very much am about planning. And secondly, which also I think is maybe first, being authentic. I don't post what other people are posting or what's necessarily trending, because that's not me. And I feel like we live in a a smart enough world where people know when you're like, when people know when you're bullshitting or when, what's like yours, So, yeah, and I think that's the way to really have a genuine social media audience. I like to approach social media as having it be more so a family. I want everyone who comes to my page to be someone that I can engage with. I don't want it to be necessarily a following situation, but I want people to come and feel community. So I definitely feel like holding true to who you are, who your brand, what your brand is most important to your social media.
Yeah, I love what you said about community, because I think in social media, it can relate to your website, but it's not just a posting of these are the things that are me or us as an organization, but it's a way to interact with your community in a virtual space. And I think you get more engagement, and but algorithms reward you for engaging with other people on your platform. So if you're taking the time to comment on other people's things, you're watching other people's live streams, like you're supporting the other people in your community, and then that also pays dividends on your own engagement, which I think is pretty cool. So far we've been talking about social media in the more generalized abstract, and I want to get into some of the specific platforms now. So we go to the next slide. What is with them? There are so many. Okay, so this is a meme that we found online that it's like, so if you have, oh, sorry, okay. So social media channels explained about donuts. So these are some different things that might work particularly well on each channel if we were talking about donuts. I don't know that donuts applies to all of us here in this room, but it is kind of a fun way to look at it. So we went through and thought about, on the next slide, what it would look like for theater makers. So we can move on. All right, so first up, we've got Facebook. And I think Facebook has changed over the years. The way that I see it now is a good way to just kind of join communities of other people that are doing the same thing as you, have conversations there. So I put here, I joined a group of Bay Area choreographers because I changed it. Oops, okay, props designers. Pretend this is props designers. Typos. I did it for engagement. Thanks. That was a setup, and it worked. But so I would say like one of the most powerful tools on Facebook now are these communities, these groups where you can say, these are a bunch of people that have this same industry experience or interest that I do, and can connect with them there. Tasi, do you want to talk about Facebook groups or using Facebook at all?
Yeah, so a really great example of a Facebook group that I like to see pop up, and it shows up regularly, is the Killing My Lobster volunteer. There you go. And while I don't necessarily engage in it a lot, sometimes I'll look at it, look at the dates, and see do I have anyone in the city that might be available. So just having that sort of not passive, but having that information available, and knowing that Facebook will serve that to me is super important, because most of the things that I do now see from my feed, I've stopped curating in a way that's meaningful to me, because I don't understand it anymore. And so having Facebook groups is a chance to sort of control that amount of information that I do take in. And if you check it, if you're a person like me who will check it once or twice in a day, you'll get some bit of information that's super duper helpful. In the other way that I use it, that's a little bit more, not passive, what's the other word? Active, thank you. I use it for my gaming group, my video game and board game group. Yeah, thank you, Adam. And that I make an effort to curate in a way that is informative, fun, and in some ways engaging, try to make community nights for everyone. And mind you, these are all theater, arts paper in the Bay Area and adjacent partners or friends. So that's how I use Facebook, and Yeah, it's too easy to get lost in the sauce. So really honing it down to two or three things that you want to focus on is super helpful and won't take up too much of your time.
I'm on a couple. It's mostly like therapy, self-help groups that help with mental health within the theater community. But I haven't joined like another like theater. I think any other Facebook group I'm a part of is like old cast groups, you know, like a lot of those. But yeah, outside of that, I pretty much keep it to Instagram and YouTube, like narrowing it down to two.
So let's move on here. So we're looking at Twitter. I would say Twitter is kind of on the decline. So I wouldn't necessarily invest a lot of time on Twitter. It just is. But it's one of those things that like if you have a very controversial opinion or something that you can make very clear in a short amount of words, it will do well on Twitter. Do either of you have some strong Twitter opinions you want to share? Tasi, you can
You know what? It's a great way to reach out to people. I think there's this strange inherent like acceptance of DMs, and I think that's where it started from, right? Slide into your DMs. That feels approachable. You know, like instead of sending a cold email, I find that for instance, well, actually, I don't have permission to share that, but yeah, Twitter is on the decline in that sense that there's a lot of shakeup happening. So if you have really important information, it's probably not going to be seen unless people are following you already. If you're trying to grow a presence as far as an individual or a brand, company, organization, it's challenging unless you dedicate a lot of your resource to understanding why it works and creating the content that currently, at this time, is boosted, right? So if you're just sharing text, it's gonna get lost. If you're sharing photos, it'll have some medium interactions. You need to make videos current. And that's the thing. When I say you have to work on it full time, it's because it's shifting. So you have to understand what people want or how the platform itself is feeding that information to other people, / serve the folks who are already supporting you. So it's a delicate balance in that sense.
Alright. Yeah, no. Okay. Alright, so next we've got YouTube, and I know both of you are really invested a lot into YouTube. So YouTube is the one like long form content platform. So Angel, why don't you start off with like how you look at YouTube and what you think as well?
I love to use YouTube. One of the reasons why is because it's a great way to get longer content out to people that they would actually like sit through that they necessarily wouldn't on Instagram. But I also love YouTube for the live. I love to do live streams on YouTube. With YouTube, you can invite people to come watch your live streams, but you also have a bunch of people that you don't know come to see your live streams, and it's really cool because it's another way that I find community and I get to engage with people that I don't know. And I just think it's a really powerful tool to use. And of course, you know, people can view it from anywhere and you can reuse so much of what you do on YouTube for any other of your social platforms. So that's one of the many reasons why I really love using YouTube.
Yeah, I think just to echo what you're saying, the long form is invaluable, but also when you're thinking about how you want to approach your plan on social media, because you have something long, you can cut that down into smaller chunks, right? And YouTube, if you don't have your personal editing suite available, there are a couple of free ones, but YouTube itself has them, and YouTube Shorts have been on the rise. So if you think you have information from your company, you know, honestly, it has to be either entertaining or educating, right? And you can have both. And as theater makers, I think we fit that bill really well. So it's about planning that, and I think we'll talk about it later. Evergreen content. What do you have right now that will work for you for the next month? Right? Raise your hand if you were on YouTube today. Raise your hand if you're on any social media today. Okay.
All right, so next, we've got LinkedIn, which is not a place where most of us spend our time, because Theater Bay Area is where we go to post our jobs and market ourselves. But I mean, it is another platform. I think it tends to get kind of out of the conversation about social media because it is less social, but it is just another place to connect with other folks in your industry. So that, but do either of you have anything you'd like to say about LinkedIn?
No, I would just echo what you're saying. It's a great place to connect with other people within the theater community. I've met so many people through LinkedIn that I'm not able to meet after their shows or like after some kind of gathering, and I think it's just an awesome tool because people can find people so easily. You can also see who you're connected to, which is really important. So yeah, and I think it helps spread makes your community seem a lot bigger than how it can seem when you're on the go all the time.
One thing I will say from an organizational perspective, LinkedIn is a great spot for folks in development and fundraising when you're trying to say like, do I know anyone that works at this company we're trying to have a partnership with? Or like, what is my connection to this foundation? You know, you can just say, oh, there's someone I know from high school works there now, or whatever. And so that sort of chain can help you make new connections. I would say that's a particularly useful aspect of LinkedIn. Write it down, all right, with the typo.
It's also a great place to practice cheering on your friends.
Yes.
And because you're not gonna post like, I got fired today. That's for Facebook, right? But on LinkedIn, you'll help your friends celebrate the victories, right? And add little comments because you can vouch for someone on there, and that's visible. So that's super helpful, right?
That should be on all social media platforms.
Yeah, I would say that applies to every social media platform, you know. Okay, so keep on going. Okay, Instagram. So this is a picture of the prop I'm making. I would say Instagram also can be a place. This is a video of the prop I'm making. Instagram is another place where they're really pushing the reels in the algorithm. So like we've noticed at TBA, when we make a video, it is pushed to people that don't follow us, but when we're posting a photo, it's not necessarily doing that. There is a different aesthetic to video reels on Instagram versus videos on TikTok. And I think some of that is a little hard to kind of say, but it's just a trendy thing. So if you are trying to follow exactly what is trending, it can be ephemeral and confusing. And so I think this is one of those places where authenticity is really shining through. So Angel, I would love to hear from you about Instagram.
Oh, thank you. With my Instagram, I keep it, it's just based off of things that I love, things that I'm working on. It's a great way to promote yourself. Instagram is also a great way to repost what other people are doing, and I love that so much. I love that I can go through stories, and my friend has this show, so I can repost it immediately. It's so good to celebrate other people on Instagram. I also, again, with the lives, I love utilizing lives on Instagram because anybody can hop on. So just speaking personally with mine, the way I have it set up is I make sure that all of my stories, which are on the top, they're like the bubbles on the top, I make sure that all of my stories are labeled so they're easy for people to follow. That's a very big one. Also, making sure that they are uniquely you. So right now, my Instagram has my writing on there. I write everything out. I love writing. I love letters. So find what's uniquely yours, what you love, and then infuse that into your Instagram so that when people come to your page, they know whose page they're coming to, not just based off of your name. Because we do live in a world where on Instagram, people like you know, the aesthetic. Everyone has like, you know, their color grids, all of those things, but people kind of start to follow what others are doing on Instagram. And if you can make it so uniquely yours, that's what you want. And I know we live in an age where, you know, people want the followers, they want, you know, people to look at their page. I'm from the school of longevity, so I love the fact that I'm growing a community there as opposed to followers, because again, I love engagement. I'm growing a community that I can take with me for years to come, and they begin to trust that, you know. So I think it's really important to hold on to what is uniquely yours and put it all over your page, and don't follow the trends of whatever else someone else is doing, because it's fleeting. So yeah, go for the longevity, and then the community will come.
Tasi, do you have anything you want to add about Instagram?
Yes. Yeah, I partially subscribe to that in the sense of like, make sure it's, when you look at it, you can immediately say, oh, this is that person or this is that company. When we're talking about I think it's the highlight bubbles that you're talking about. Yeah, the highlight bubbles. If you don't know what that is yet, they exist on in between a couple of your avatar and your content, right? I don't see this enough where theater companies actually save their season announcements into those highlight bubbles and label it, right? So that you can look at it. If you're visiting 3 months after the season announcement, you're not having to scroll farther down, or you can just look, oh, there it is, and it's in a nice condensed form. So, and I think what you're talking about where you can customize those, there are some free templates on Canva for highlight bubble art. I think that's what it's called. I think it's also a great opportunity, like if you're doing comedy, to do like a hyper cut of all the laughs. You know, like when we're talking about trends, this is my own thing of like reframing words that make you want to push social media away. Brand, don't really like it, right? But really, if you think about it as an individual, it's how people recognize you, right? So like, I could recognize most friends from like half a mile away by just the way they walk, right? We're trained as human beings to understand that. So when you are thinking about posting on Instagram, yours has a great combination of like your words, but also your face, right? So I understand, oh, Angel enjoys words, right? Like on a base level. Mine is messy. I enjoy mess. But it's organized mess and it's thoughtful mess. That makes sense to me, and I think after a while, we are also trained to recognize pattern. So you can see when I'm not in a show, you can see when I'm doing my personal projects. Also, one more thing. If you are an individual on Instagram and you're just getting into it, you can switch your profile from being a personal profile to a content creator / professional. So if you feel you're being pulled in the direction of like, I don't know if I want to share that part of myself, make another profile. Reconcile it with yourself later, how you want to consolidate that, because that's something that I've had to deal with. It's like, well, that's also part of me. Okay, well, I'll just put it together in one, right? So look into that. I know there's a lot of options in Instagram, but again, it is take an afternoon, look at it, get some coffee, tea, matcha. Yeah.
Can I add one more thing? With Instagram, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, it's wonderful to schedule your posts. I know everyone is so busy, and social media can sometimes feel like another full-time job, but if you can set aside like half a day or an evening where you just put your posts together, I think it's meta business is what it's called. You can just put your posts together and schedule every time you want them to go out, and then just leave it if you have a busy work week. Yes. And it's such a great tool, and it helps you to just post things that you might forget about, and you're like, oh, it's too late now, or like, it's not, the energy isn't there. It's super helpful tool to use, so I would definitely say utilize that.
Yeah, Hootsuite.
And also, I like the meta business, but if you want to branch out of that, Hootsuite is what I use sometimes. HOOT, yeah, like an owl. Hoot, sweet. Canva does it too. Yeah, you can schedule. Oh yeah, just to echo. Hi, Abby. Meta will also give you like optimal posting times, so which is handy. Absolutely.
Just to add to the list, we use TBA, we use one called Metricool, and it's been working pretty well for us. It also gives you optimal times, so it's nice. Yeah, I see a question. Hello.
I've been on Instagram since Instagram came out, right? And so like I have 1,000 posts, like from when I didn't know what Instagram was to like figuring out how to learn certain things to now. And then I see that like the younger generation, I have a 20-year-old, so the way she uses Instagram is really different. But what I'm noticing is like they're taking like they're like taking everything off. Does that make sense to like start over? Do you repost your post? How do you show that you have a following and still like clean up your space and not feel like you have to repost the things for them to be?
Together as one.
I just want to start off by saying the archive function on Instagram is a lifesaver when you're looking to clean up your feed, because it basically just hides the old posts from your profile. So you say, I want to just kind of clean it up, but then you can unarchive it and show it and have it show up later if you change your mind and you want it to be on your profile again. So if you're feeling like you don't want to just delete everything and cut all of it, but the archive function, invaluable.
Can I add very quickly, Phaedra, you were asking, does it make sense to delete everything? If you no longer identify with all of the posts that you had, yes, delete it all. Because especially if it's, of course, we're all talking about like public-facing profiles. You have directors, you have people from work. Like if they see something that you don't want them to see, delete it. But also if it's something that is not helpful to you as an artist, I would say, yeah, delete or archive. And as for the followers that you currently have, 9 times out of 10 they're gonna stay, but you just need to make sure that you have a plan. So if you're gonna delete everything, maybe make sure that you have those Instagram posts timed, so you're not looking at a blank wall when someone comes to look at your page.
Yeah, I think that was mostly it. No, outside of the archive, if there's a button there that lets you decide if you want it off your profile grid. So if you are making reels, but you're also doing a hybrid posting schedule where you're doing photos and such, you may want just photos as your kind of front face on the grid, but then still have the access to reels in the reel tab, right? So I think as a user of as like someone who likes to scroll, I like the option. Like I don't want to be bombarded by sound, in the morning or something like that if I'm scrolling and I don't have that on. Which, by the way, I think you can turn off.
Awesome. And we're going to talk a little bit more about Instagram later. We're going to talk about Instagram takeovers. But we'll just finish up here. So we can look at TikTok. TikTok, in terms of discoverability, is the best tool because its algorithm can, seemingly at random, share your video with millions and millions of people. And so if you're interested in reaching a new audience, it can be really helpful. But you have no control over who that audience is. So I think with TikTok, you don't know if it's going to result in audiences because it might get pushed to a bunch of people that live on the East Coast and we're, Bay Area theaters. So in that time, it doesn't always make a lot of sense, but it can always help promote the brand of your organization and it can be fun. Yeah. Would either of you like to say anything about TikTok? Does anyone want to hear about TikTok?
Okay, here we go. That's what the panel's for, right? Hashtags are super powerful, so don't overdo it, but also make sure that it is aimed towards reaching the audience that you would like to curate, right? When we're talking about relationship building and building trust online, I think it's that thing of how do you bring yourself authentically to trends. Again, that's another word that in my mind I'm trying to combat as like not a bad thing. Trends just means like that's the stream. Sometimes you want to just get on the stream, but you can get in your own boat. That's fine. Right? And think about it that way. So think about speaking from like a company perspective, like what are the elements that make us a company? How do we bring those elements into the trend that already exists, so that you are simultaneously allowing more people to see your content? So it comes down to what am I looking for when you're thinking about followers, engagement? What is the end goal? Is it relationship building, which is an entirely perfect goal, especially when you're like a company facing your audience, or as a person, as an artist? What is your goal? What is the relationship you want to build together, right? And I say together because specifically as a theater artist, without the audience, the story is incomplete, right? So how do you tell a story on TikTok, on Instagram, in all the forms that they have, that creates a story so that the audience can help complete, whether that's with a laugh, whether that's like, oh my God, that's exactly how I feel. Oh yeah, I slipped too, or whatever. Or stitching it, right? I think that's I think if you're thinking about tools on TikTok, stitching is incredibly potent. Sure, stitching is the idea that there is a pre-existing content that either is accidentally uploaded or someone purposely made for stitching, and you can bring yourself to it by recording something and putting it together so that they work in unison. So it exists by itself, but if you, like for example, I'm singing like a high part in a song, and someone else can stitch themselves singing the low part. Someone else, and you may have already seen this, but this is what it's called. And then you have a 5-part harmony existing on TikTok. And that's evergreen content, right? That you can then download and put it on Instagram or put it on your website or wherever you'd like it to be.
I think on TikTok in particular, videos where a majority of the folks that are watching all the way to the end are rewarded. So to be a little bit clickbaity in your content, to be like, what are we doing that makes people want to see the end of it? So things where someone is doing a time lapse of like building something, or doing really, people want to know what it is in the end. In their storytelling videos, people want to know how a story ends up. So anything when you're creating video content for TikTok and for Instagram Reels in particular, trying to think about like, is this something that would make people want to watch all the way to the end to see what the result is? I think is one of the ways to sort of like work with the algorithm instead of against it. But there's a lot of fun tools on TikTok. There's also a live function on TikTok. So talking about lives and engaging with people there. Okay, so those are all of the platforms. And I know, and I think just kind of summing this up is like, you don't have to do them all at once. Start with the ones that speak to you, that you're already using, that you think you have a handle on, and just start building your community there, and then branch out once you're comfortable. You don't have to become viral on every platform all at once. Yeah. Anything else y'all want to add about that?
I was thinking about TikTok when we were talking about the hashtags. I think you're only allowed 15 hashtags on TikTok. Don't quote me on that. But it's a lot less than Instagram. So make sure that, like Tasi said, make sure that you're using keywords that directly describe your video, but also think about how your video can relate to whatever is trending. So if your video is a part of whatever is trending, use those as your top hashtags, just so more people can see it.
All right, so let's move along. Okay, it's a lot, but have fun. Okay, all right, I'm sorry, I said all this before moving, so we continue on. You don't have to master them all at once. Okay. Most important thing is authenticity. And this is something that's come up in kind of every conversation we've had so far today. But I don't have any other slides for authenticity, Because I think you can't put down a set of rules for this makes you authentic and this doesn't, because it's all about like being true to yourself. So I think I'm gonna just start off by saying like, what for you is like a metric of, am I being authentic to me in this post?
For me, a metric is I know who I am as an artist, so I'm gonna put any of that down. For example, I love vinyl records, so you'll always see that throughout my my stories or my page. So I think when you're thinking about what's authentically you, what are the things that bring you joy, and what are the things that bring joy to you and your friends? Something that you can share with other people. And to be authentic, it's like one of those words that I'm like, everyone uses now, but I don't feel like a lot of people know what it means, because sometimes we're in a world where there's just like so much noise that sometimes people don't know what's authentic to them anymore, and that's okay. But the great thing with like all of these social media platforms is that you can learn what's authentic to you. A lot of people think that they really love, I don't know, what's a trending thing right now? Yeah, pull out your phone. But I don't know, like anything that's, yeah, exactly. But if you have a video of like people doing, I don't know, a dance to this like Doja Cat song, and everyone thinks that they like it because they're seeing it everywhere, but they don't really like it. Sit down with yourself and remember the things that you do like, and that's what is authentically you, and go in that direction. And as you go into that direction, you'll find, actually, I don't like this, and things start to peel away and things start to add on. So I think that's what's authentically you. Something that is also authentically me is that I'm an introvert. I an introverted extrovert, I think that's the correct term. But I do get overwhelmed with social media, so what's authentic for me is planning my posts. What's authentic for me is not always being on social media all the time. But what also is authentic to me is going to a friend's page because I know that they're gonna have an amazing show and I wanna uplift that. So make sure that you pick maybe like 3 things that are really authentic to you and uplift those so it doesn't make social media feel as daunting and as big.
I really like that. Don't make it feel as big, right? And I don't want to necessarily speak in like my personal, like what feels authentic to me, but I think observing theaters when they put typos, when theaters are able to share more than just their shows, that feels authentic to me, especially when I've been to those organizations and I know or I'm familiar with the energy of the staff and the building, and like, do I feel that when I'm like, I want to speak specifically to theaters in the Bay, obviously, but like, does the perspective that's shared with me on the post feel authentic to me, or does it shout, oh, you're not sure what to do, you just needed to post something today because you're on like a schedule or something, right? So even if I don't see a post from a company for a while, but I see something and it's like, oh, they're renovating, or they were doing like a charity thing, I'm like, oh, that's who they are, I feel that's authentic, right? As opposed to like, well, you can come to your own conclusions about that, but then as a person, it's, if it doesn't feel good, I'm not gonna do it.
I think some of it, there's like the 2 halves to social media. There's the things that you're posting, and then there's the way that you're interacting after you've posted. And I think some of that like second half can kind of get lost in organizational social media, because if you just post your content and then forget to interact with people, then you're not being authentically who you are as an organization. Because as an organization, you're connecting with people in the community and you're working with artists and you're creating this stuff. But on social media, you're just a wall. You're like a billboard, right? And so I think I know it takes more time, but just a little bit every day, just like go through your feed and say like, these are the people in our community. like make sure that you're following the people in your community, other theaters, artists that you work with, and like congratulate them on things that are going well, and share their posts and respond to people when they comment on your stuff. You know, it's like that part of it can really help make your social media feel more connected to the work that you're doing in 3 dimensions, you know? And it takes a little bit more time, but it's just like if once a day you're saying, all right, we're gonna go and we're gonna check social media. And we're not gonna get pulled into the doom scroll. But you just, you know, spend a little bit of time interacting and building that community, then that generally builds your base overall.
Something that I notice personally, whenever I'm looking at a page from a theater and I'm going through the stories or on their wall and I see that they're uplifting another theater or community with like no prompting, I'm like, I mess with that theater so hard because I love to see that. And I think sometimes we get so isolated within our own companies that we forget about uplifting each other. And it doesn't have to be because something, you know, amazing is going on. It could be like, oh, they saw a post and they're like, oh, I love that, and they're posting it, you know. And I love seeing that from different theaters. So anytime I see that, I'm like, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's, you know, a scarcity mindset that can get us into like, well, if I post somebody else's show, audiences will come to mine. And really, if we're working together to promote theater going and theater making, like it rising tide, all that stuff, right? So I think the more that you can do to work against that fear, that promoting a different organization is going to take away from yours, is only going to benefit you. Yeah. Tasi, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah, I'm add one more thing to that authenticity thing. Who here has read the first 2 chapters of Artist Way? Okay, good. So when you're thinking about like making things for like authenticity's sake and being yourself, it's curating. At the end of the day, everyone here is a curator of your personal taste. And when you're tackling like social media, like how do you curate that? So to your point, Phaedra, of like, I have so much stuff that doesn't really speak to me anymore. How do you curate that? So, you know, if you need to have a billboard in your room that says curate, you know, and then with the art, you know, however you want to do it, like really focus in on that. Like how do you curate your work? How do you curate how other people see your work? Because no one's going to know you more than you. And that it works in an organizational standpoint as well, right? No one's going to know your company as well as the people who are on the ground every day there putting in the hours.
All right. So we'll move along. We've got a little actionable idea. So this is about making the most of your Instagram story takeovers. So I think this might be a concept that folks are familiar with, but the next slide will tell you a little bit. So an Instagram story takeover is where for a set period of time, usually like a day, you have someone from your company or your cast take over your Instagram stories. You have them post for you for that time. It's a really easy way to add like a very personal face to your organizational brand because this is a person and they're going through their day. So we all kind of had a little discussion about ways that you can take this concept, Instagram story, and make it work for you a little bit better. I'm sorry that we have to turn around to look at the slides, but we can just have a little chit chat. So, all right. So here's the first one. So before the takeover, so let's step up there. We can kind of just talk about this. It's about like choosing the time that you want to do it, so that it's a time that's full of action, and then setting up the person who's going to do the takeover for success. So Tasi, you were talking about some things that would be really helpful around like sharing your brand guidelines and also.
Sure, yeah. If you're deciding to do an Instagram takeover, right? And I think some of us have had to do that. I think one of the important things, as with anything, is as the organization, you need to communicate the expectation of what is, you know, expected of this person. I don't think that's communicated as often. I think there is sort of a vague template of what a takeover looks like, based on some accidental takeovers in the past. And so I think we need to, as an organization or even as a person, decide what is it that you want to achieve with a takeover. You always have to have that goal there so that you can temper the expectations to the result. And so I see someone wearing a Rocky Horror shirt. I love that because more than this, but all of like storytelling on social media, how do you build that anticipation? If you don't have any other guideline for yourself on what to post, ask yourself, how do I build anticipation? So what is that, right? What is that for your post? And so, takeovers, build the anticipation for it. Who's doing it? Why are they taking time out of their busy rehearsal schedule to share brushing teeth?
Right.
It's important. It's lovely. I love to see it, but build that. So whether, I think it's a lot to ask the artist who will be doing the takeover to build that for themselves. And that's where the organization has to step in with some prompts of hey, if you want to skip the morning thing, it doesn't have to be an all-day thing, right? Here's how you can condense it and have some good examples. So going back to archiving things, make a highlight reel out of your Instagram takeover, right? Super important. Temper those expectations.
And to add to that, especially, theater companies, if you are wanting cast members to do an Instagram takeover, I say the first day that you enter the rehearsal space is so helpful. Pick somebody, do it sooner rather than later. I've been in many experiences where we'll be in the middle of the tech, and they'll be, by the way, can you do an Instagram? And we're we're so tired. We are so tired. So I think it's helpful to time it, and like Tasi said, having prompts, and also choosing more than one person in your cast. And also a fun way to do maybe a bit more of a loose version is to ask the cast members or anyone on staff, the production team, for their footage that they've been taking with their phones, because we're all doing it, There's so many fun behind the scenes footage that you can use without it being and today you have to, get all this footage, just collect and have a Google Drive where they can store all the footage, and then have whoever, if you have someone who's running social media for your company, they can use that footage. So it's even sometimes better to just have a social media person and give them that footage, so it takes a bit of the pressure off of the actors if they don't want to do it.
One more thing, super important, accessibility needs around that. There may be people who would love to do an Instagram takeover, but maybe aren't comfortable using their own phone, right? Maybe if you get a donation, as a company, sometimes we receive donations from your last generation iPhone or Android will shoot great video. So having someone just take the video, and maybe there's someone within the company who understands the branding better and wants to curate that content, then I think that's a great step forward for building that expectation with the person you're partnering with to do the takeovers.
One way I've seen an Instagram takeover work kind of nicely is the company's social media manager was doing the posting, and the person doing the takeover was just texting them images throughout. They were just here's some pictures, and here's what they are, and then the social media manager does the I'll put the font on and make it look pretty. But then the person who's just doing the live of their day, all they're responsible for is here's an image, here's a quick video. That's one way you can make it a little bit easier on the people that are doing it for you. One thing I also wanted to mention is that if someone is coming to do a takeover, and especially if they're going to be sharing their social media as part of that, you are opening them up to a new audience. And so you should think about ways that you're protecting them should they get any harassment out of it. This is particularly true if you're working with anyone with any sort of marginalized identity. The internet is a big place, and just existing can draw harassment to you. And so if you're opening up your actors to a new audience on your social media channel, like think about what procedures you have in place, like if they start getting harassment during them. This is kind of a downer, but it's an important thing to think through before you say, hey, I want to put you publicly on our social media in this way. Like think about how you're going to protect them and keep them safe during the process. Yeah, do you want to say anything about that? All right, cool. I got a second. All right. Okay. All right. So we can go on to the next one. We've kind of talked about this a little bit just during the takeover, really thinking about the process that works for you. And I'd like to move on to the after the takeover because we were talking about creating evergreen content. And so Tasi mentioned turning your takeover into a highlight on your story. You can also turn it into a reel. You can cross-post that reel on TikTok and YouTube Shorts. And suddenly you've got a one-day takeover that is content on like 3 different platforms. So that you can really get a lot out of this one thing. Anything else you want to add about that?
Yeah, I think if you are going to do that, put it in writing so that the artists who are involved in it also understand, like, wait a minute, I did that like 6 months ago. Like, I did that 2 years ago. You know, just as so it's not a big surprise. Put it in writing.
Also, I would like to add, I know this isn't very comfortable to talk about, but if the load of work that the actor is doing is, if you want just like quick videos in here or there for the takeover, totally doable. But if you're asking for something that's a bit more extensive, consider compensation. It's something that we don't really talk about in musical theater with takeovers. It's just like, oh, you're here in rehearsal, so just do the thing. But there are some people I've worked with in my cast who are just so good at what they do. Like they go above and beyond, and they're just like mavericks in like the world of social media. So I'm like, it's worth compensating them, especially if you do have someone who already runs your social media, but you have the actor who's carrying the bulk of the work. I think it's awesome to talk about some kind of stipend to begin with, and for the theater to offer it and not always have the actor have to ask for it. I just think it's a nice standard that we can start.
That's seconded. Yeah.